when men are together, they don't gossip. In quotes now, please forgive me.
Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Life, Love and Relationships. My name is Oluwakemi. Welcome again to Life, Love and Relationships. Today we continue the series on vulnerability in relationships, and then we're putting together male perspectives on the same topic, vulnerability in relationships. And to be doing that for us today, we have Taufik Oyelami. He's been married for several years and who is also an entrepreneur. He'll be sharing his views on the topic today. We're delighted to have you here today. Thank you for making out the time.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for having me.
How would you define vulnerability in the context of a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage?
I will first of all say that I don't know if I'm qualified to start defining, but if I go by my life experience, I will say that at the root of vulnerability is trust, meaning that I trust you enough to show things about me, things in me that I will ordinarily not want the world to see or to know. So if I trust you enough to share such with you, I'm making myself vulnerable to you. And in return, I have an expectation that you will help me in keeping it as I want it to be kept. And if possible, if you think you can also help me to improve on those things that I do not have the confidence that I am good about. So for me, when a relationship gets to that point, that is when people are truly vulnerable with each other. So now, by the way I have said it, it suggests that trust has to be mutual, meaning that the vulnerability has to be mutual. So I don't know if I've answered you, because I'm definitely sure I'm not able to define because I'm not an authority. But I can only share my own experience.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. You touched on a very essential tool in building vulnerability. You mentioned the word trust. Do you believe that in this scenario where you're already married to this person, should you expect that this person should earn the trust, or because now you're married to that person, there are certain roles that you can only fulfill together because you trust one another to share these things that you defined as your vulnerabilities? Is this an expectation, or is just something you believe that this person has to earn?
Okay. If you are still at the stage of earning, you are not supposed to be married yet. So before two people get married, they've already established vulnerability, mutual vulnerability, because it is in that trust and mutual vulnerability that their marriage or relationship can be sustained. Believe me, if you are still at the stage of expecting, or you're still not sure, or you want this, no. If you haven't reached that point,
you shouldn't even marry them.
You shouldn't take it further.
Great point. Great point. Thank you for that. Why do you think vulnerability is essential in deepening intimacy in marriage?
Before I talk about how vulnerability impacts intimacy, I will even say that vulnerability impacts everything in marriage. Remember, it is supposed to be two to become one, right? So everything in a marriage is impacted by vulnerability. So if you are not willing to let go, I'm not sure you can truly be happy. It is until you trust someone enough to truly let go. That is when that marriage can make you better than you are as an individual.
I think you touched on something, and I just wanted you to expand a bit more on that. Is to what extent should you go in being vulnerable? Should there be boundaries? Should it be boundless? To what extent?
The way I will answer that question is this. To what extent do you want to trust somebody who your life has been intertwined with? It should be unalloyed.
Yeah.
It should be 100%.
Thank you for that.
Remember, the reason we are using vulnerability is because they can hurt you. But you see, if you are
with the information you've given to
it's
them,
not even the information,
yourself,
everything that they know about you that only they know.
Put you in a vulnerable position.
Put you in a vulnerable position. So meaning the word vulnerability suggests risk. So now, the implication of that is this. There is a risk that they can deeply hurt you. However, without carrying that risk, you cannot also be deeply happy, which is the purpose that marriage should serve.
Thank you. So before we miss the point, you were going to answer the question on how does vulnerability impact intimacy in
I
marriage?
believe that if you are not vulnerable
How
to
do they
each other,
impact intimacy?
I believe that if you are not vulnerable to each other, if you are not 100% vulnerable to each other, you cannot have the best intimacy in marriage. That's my belief. I may be wrong. That is just what I believe. Because remember, you are letting yourself go to this person or for this person. So if you don't let yourself go 100%, the purpose of intimacy, I don't think it can be served 100%.
What do you think are the most common misconceptions that people have about vulnerability in marriage? Because I'm saying this because everybody has their perspective, right? We've come across a number of males that believe that a man shouldn't be vulnerable in marriage. You have a different perspective. So what sort of misconceptions have you seen about vulnerability in marriage that you want to talk about?
This is a tricky question. It is tricky because when you say men by nature, when it comes to the matters of the heart, men don't let go easily by nature.
I find it interesting that you said earlier that you shouldn't even marry somebody that you cannot be vulnerable to.
Exactly.
Yet, I think the second question I asked you, your answer to that implied that you shouldn't even be married to somebody that you don't want to be vulnerable to. You find out that most married men still carry this idea that because they are the leader, there's an extent to which vulnerability should go.
Well, people do all sorts of things. It doesn't make it right.
Yeah, but I want you to tie that to
Okay,
some of the misconceptions you've seen.
well, I like the way you put it as misconception because a lot of time, maturity also has to do with all these things.
Absolutely.
As you grow older and you become more mature, you will realize that really, for a marriage to work, the two parties, they lean on each other, they depend on each other. If you start out by thinking I'm the leader and all that, for as long as there is trust there, life will teach you, experience will teach you to moderate it. And at the end of the day, if you truly desire success for your marriage, for your relationship, your experiences will nudge you to the point of totally submitting.
To one another.
Correct.
To one another.
Yes.
Thank you.
However, I must say something.
Yes.
There must be mutual commitment ab initio to say we want to get ourselves to this point. Once that is there, it will not matter so
I like
much
that word, mutual commitment.
that we want to get ourselves there. So by that, in the initial misconceptions and all these things, over time, everybody will drop all those toga and gravitate towards
because you know you
the
have a
ideal
common goal.
Correct.
You're driving to achieve the same thing.
Yes. The honest truth is this. No matter how you've trusted each other or not, but at the time, the point you are starting out, the journey that you have traveled before you get to that point, they still have impact. You have trusted this person enough to want to be vulnerable with them. Then the two parties must be intentional about saying we'll be committed into driving ourselves to the ideal that we have defined, that is based on absolute trust, that is based on vulnerability. We are aware of the risk that this carry, but because we want to be happy forever with each other, we are committing to this ideal. Once you say that, so all those initial misconceptions and all that will be addressed over time in a way that gets everybody better, puts everybody in a better place, which is the purpose that marriage should serve.
From the way you've described your perspective so far, you believe in vulnerability in marriage. I mean, that is something you've established so far. How can you help men to see that vulnerability is something that they need and it's not something that should work against them?
First of all, I believe we are all work in progress. I'm work in progress. If you ask my wife, by the time she starts to share her perspective, you will know I'm work in progress. However, it does not change the truth. So the closer we all want to get to the truth, the closer we want to get to it, the better for all of us. Now, the question you asked is, how can we help men
men to see that
see?
vulnerability it's something that should serve them in their marriage? It is not against them.
Well, open communication. Open communication helps a lot. Remember, we are starting out with trust. So trust should also imply that whatever is going on, we must talk about it. We're talking about it not to vent. Even if you vent, vent and leave it there. At the end of the day, we'll still come back and talk. Whatever happens, I believe once you keep talking in a relationship, it's going to help. Because the more you talk in an environment of trust, you mutually identify in each other the baggage that each and every one of us have been carrying from our life journey before past experiences.
Yeah.
So the more we are open, the more we are honest, the more we trust and
we understand one another
and communicate. The more we communicate, the better our understanding about each other is, and the more it's achievable for for the man to start looking at things differently. I may be wrong with this, I'm not saying it like it's a theory, but I've observed that marriages that have lasted long time, they gravitate towards the individual weaknesses,
okay.
which translates to vulnerability. But you will see that they've found a way to protect each other, to live with each other happily with it. And the longer people stay together in such marriage, they are inseparable. They are unable to live without each other.
So they find a way to complement their weaknesses.
God bless you.
Because your partner is not hiding his or her weaknesses for
Yes.
you. You know that you need to step in for this
Correct.
person in this area.
Correct.
But if you continually want to show that you have strength all over, you don't afford your partner the privilege or the opportunity to come in and help you, which is what marriage is really about.
That's if you bottle it in, if you lock it in.
Yeah, they don't know where to help you.
Open communication.
Yes.
Open communication.
You touched on a very important point earlier. I know you would have a different perspective, and I don't know if you would also acknowledge it, but I think that we live in a society where people believe generally that men aren't supposed to talk, that talking is a women's thing. So the expectation is, oh, the woman is nagging. I think that in most cases, what you find women doing when they're talking is they're looking for an opportunity to bond. Because like you said, communication is where you both get to understand one another, right? But when a man has been raised to believe that I'm not supposed to talk, talking is a woman's thing, then it's sort of hinders how much both of you can bond and how much you can truly enjoy this thing called marriage. Do you first of all agree that this is something we hear people say? It might be in a different context. You might interpret it differently from the way a woman might look at it.
You are right. However, let's be careful here. When men are together, they don't gossip. In quotes now, please forgive me. You understand that women are generally more emotional than men. So because of that,
but communication does not necessarily need to be emotional. It's just expression.
I'm going somewhere. So because a lot of time when we say we talk, I remember I said vent.
Vent. Yeah.
When you are venting, you are not talking. You need to get out the emotion. Whereas a lot of time you find that men, they bottle that in. In the process of venting out emotion,
they bottle that in because somebody has ingrained in their belief system that they shouldn't do it.
Regardless of where that is coming from. What's important here is mostly you find that in men more than women.
Yes, and I agree. Sometimes personality also comes to play. But generally, there seems to be that idea in our society that I personally believe has not served us well.
Is it a societal thing? I don't think there is any society you go to that you don't find the elements of that. It's just the nature of men. But that which is still at the heart of our conversation, vulnerability. If the man has found you vulnerable enough to say, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and there is trust, of course, there must have been trust before that happens.
If the man has found you vulnerable enough, or you have
found... Sorry. If the man has found you trustworthy enough to say that, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And then you have
found that woman as somebody that you are willing to be vulnerable to.
Exactly. Right. So, mutual trust. And you have that mutual commitment that I spoke about. Over time, you find that the layers that that shield will
It's
begin
been
to
peeled
peel.
off. Yeah.
Will begin to peel because the trust will be getting stronger because of the mutual commitment to this journey we're taking it to our own defined ideal. A lot of time you find that initially it might not be like that. If we don't all get on the train of life from the same train station, but over time, all these things will improve. Once there is mutual trust, there is mutual commitment, right? I believe things will improve over time. Yeah, you are right. So men try to bottle it. Even when men are together, like unlike women, when women are together, they talk about everything that is affecting them. Men are not like that.
You talk about common interest, football, politics, yeah,
I may be wrong, really.
business.
I believe because men naturally want to protect their own, the family and all. So they are always looking for things that will help them in doing that. So, and that will be things of interest, things of interest. Okay, what can we do together to bring to make more together? Okay, we have to be happy. We've been working all week. I mean, let's go and watch football. Let's have some drink together, just to what do they call that thing now? To diffuse, right? So those kind of things, because men want to just be happy, so they do. Whereas women, the things that bother them when they see when they're together, they try to open up and say all these things, not because really a lot of time it's not because they want guidance or anything, they just want to let it out because that's who they are. You cannot carry so much emotion around and you don't let out the let it out the pressure,
Yeah.
you know.